the background to early Buddhism. Origins. The early history of India is less well known than that of the other great civilizations of the ancient world. Much of what is known cannot be placed in a secure chronological framework. Until recently, most scholars believed that the founder of Buddhism was born in the second quarter of the 6th century BCE and remained active well into the first quarter of the 5th century. As a result of important new studies of early Indian chronology, it now seems more likely that the Buddha's main period of teaching activity took place towards the end of the 5th century. Nonetheless, we do have a certain amount of more definite information. We know, for example, that the Buddha was certainly a contemporary of the founder of Jainism. And we also know the names of most of the important kings ruling in northern India during his lifetime. So the context in which the Buddha lived and taught is clear. Most of northern India seems to have been inhabited by people speaking early forms of the Middle Indian languages, still rather close to Sanskrit. These dialects were probably mutually comprehensible, so communications across India would have been easier at this time. Outside India, important developments had taken place. During the later part of the 6th century, Cyrus the Great was completing the extension of the Persian Empire into Central Asia and perhaps what is now known as Afghanistan. Within 2 decades, Darius had made the Indus Valley into the richest province of the empire. Henceforth, the Middle Indian world was in a situation similar to that of the Greek world to the west. Overshadowed by the enormous territories of the great king, both experienced great cultural and economic impact. Skills, techniques, and ideas from the ancient civilizations of the area could spread more rapidly than ever before. The similarity with Greece is striking in other respects also. In both these frontier areas, we find a proliferation of ideas and systems of belief offering different prescriptions for life. Just as the Greek philosophical tradition afterwards emerged to influence the subsequent intellectual history of Western civilization, so too Buddhism later emerged to influence the intellectual and religious history of Asian civilization. The Buddha appears to have made a conscious attempt to avoid the dogmatism of competing religious systems. He aimed to teach only what was essential for spiritual development and carefully excluded from his system everything not directly relevant to that purpose. The result is radically unusual. The Buddha set out a middle way based mainly upon pragmatic considerations, in which one-sided viewpoints and aims were rejected. Materialistic views of life and spirituality-oriented beliefs in personal immortality were considered equally misleading. Mistaken too were extreme goals, seeking either self-satisfaction through indulgence in pleasure or self-purification through ascetic discipline. Traditional religious beliefs, rites and customs were re-evaluated on the basis not so much of reason as of what might be called spiritual common sense. Extreme forms of superstition and ritualism were opposed, but so was a naive materialism, which sought to deny the real experiences of the spiritual path. Buddhism and Hinduism. It is sometimes suggested that the Buddha was a Hindu. If by Hindu is meant anyone adhering to a religion of Indian origin, then he obviously was. However, If Hinduism is understood as that synthesis of various traditions oriented towards the Brahminical Vedic tradition, which has been the religion of most educated Indians since at least the 5th century CE, then the Buddha was certainly not a Hindu. Indeed, Buddhism was one of the influences which led to the formation of the Hindu synthesis. If Hinduism is taken as synonymous with Brahmanism, then it is uncertain what exactly was the Buddha's relation to that. During the period of the formation of Buddhism, there were at least 3 major sources of religious authority in India. 1. The hereditary priestly class of the Brahmins, preserving the scriptures of the Vedic tradition and much ancillary learning. 2. The naked ascetics, emphasizing ascetic practices. 3. The clothed wanderers, parivrajakas, with a less extreme discipline. While some in groups 2 and 3 may have adhered to the Vedic tradition, it is clear that many did not. From the naked ascetics developed the religions of the Jains and Ajivakas. Buddhism may have been more closely related to the third group. Some scholars believe that the non-Brahminical traditions derive from indigenous Indian beliefs stemming from the Indus Valley civilization, circa 2000 BCE. Before the entry of the speakers of Indo-European languages who brought the beginnings of the Vedic tradition to India. More probably, native and immigrant elements had become inextricably mixed long before the 5th century BCE. Buddhism is certainly influenced by and aware of all 3 contemporary tendencies. The Vedic tradition was certainly important, but not yet fully formed. The classical spiritual literature of that tradition contained in the Upanishads is not easily datable. The very earliest Upanishads are probably pre-Buddhist. Others may be contemporary with early Buddhism, but probably the majority of the 14 or so major Upanishads are post-Buddhist and perhaps influenced by Buddhism.